Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
The Wild West was one of the deadliest places in history. It was not a land of heroes and adventure. It was an open-air slaughterhouse where incurable diseases, brutal violence, and horrific accidents killed thousands every year. Most people who went west died there. They did not build fortunes. They simply did not survive. Today, I will show 18 documented ways to die in that era. Some so common they became routine. Others so disturbing they were erased from history books. Number 1. Duels and gunfights in saloons. Wild West saloons were anything but glamorous. Floors were covered in spit, damp sawdust was stained, and signs saying, "Check your weapons at the door," were ignored by everyone. Violence erupted over absurd reasons. Two cowboys who had never met could kill each other over a chair, a dirty look, or spilled beer. The pattern was always the same. One man drew, the other reacted, and both died right there. The owner dragged the bodies into the alley, cleaned the blood, and reopened in 20 minutes. Violence in Dodge City between 1876 and 1885 killed an average of 5 men per month. But the town had only 100 to 200 residents. Do the math. It worked like this. 3 shots of bad whiskey lowered inhibitions. Someone looked at someone the wrong way. Words were exchanged. And suddenly, 7 people were firing at the same time inside a closed space. Most bullets missed the original target and hit innocent bystanders. Men died without ever drawing a weapon, simply for being in the wrong place. Shooters fired from different directions, and no one knew who delivered the fatal shot. Even the fastest, most famous gunmen died betrayed, shot in the back while playing cards or drinking with their guard down. The truth about duels in the West? They were not noble noon showdowns on the main street. They were drunken murders in dark, chaotic places where no one was sure who shot whom. A life was worth so little that bodies were buried without identification. Number 2. Capture and death at the hands of hostile tribes. Traveling alone across the Great Plains was almost a death sentence. Wagon trains offered protection in numbers, but anyone who strayed from the group, anyone left behind by a lame horse or broken wheel, became an easy target. And when indigenous warriors captured an intruder in their territory, it was rarely a quick death. It was a message to others who thought of invading those lands. Plains tribes, Sioux, Cheyenne, Comanche, Apache, had war codes developed over centuries. Capturing an enemy alive was a greater display of courage than killing him in battle. What came next depended on many factors: which tribe, which warrior made the capture, whether personal revenge was involved, whether the tribe had recently lost members. Some prisoners were adopted, replacing fallen warriors. Others were traded for ransom, but many faced torture rituals that tested courage and endurance. Warriors who died without screaming or begging were respected. Those who broke quickly were despised even at the final moment. The process could last days. It began with small cuts, burns with glowing sticks, fingers broken one by one, all done methodically, keeping the victim conscious as long as possible. Women of the tribe often participated, especially if they hadn't lost husbands or children in fights against whites. Scalping, removing the scalp, was real, but Hollywood exaggerated it. It was not done to everyone, and often it was post-mortem, a war trophy, just as white soldiers also took indigenous scalps. The most terrifying part for settlers was uncertainty. Attacks could come out of nowhere. You were herding cattle, checking traps, or fetching water, and suddenly you were surrounded by mounted warriors. Fleeing on horseback rarely worked. They knew every inch of the territory and their horses were faster. Number 3. Brutal amputations without anesthesia. The Civil War ended in 1865, but the medical techniques of the war followed veterans westward. And those techniques were barbaric. Surgical tools were the same used to build barns: carpenter saws, freshly sharpened kitchen knives, thick needles and thread made from animal gut. There were no sterilized operating rooms. It was a wooden table, 4 strong men to hold the patient, and a bottle of whiskey. Real anesthesia was a luxury of Eastern hospitals. In the West, you bit a piece of leather and prayed to pass out quickly. When a bullet shattered a bone or an accident crushed a limb, the choice was simple: amputate or die of gangrene within a week. The procedure took between 5 and 10 minutes of extreme pain. Most patients fainted during it. When it ended, a heated iron was used to seal bleeding. About 1/3 of patients died, not from blood loss, but from traumatic shock. The human body simply could not withstand that level of trauma and shut down completely. Worse were situations on isolated farms, days away from the nearest doctor. When severe accidents happened, family members had to perform the procedure themselves with improvised tools. Many did not survive. Poorly trained doctors amputated as a precaution. Compound fracture? Amputate? Infection in a finger? Amputate the entire hand. It was faster, easier, and the doctor did not have to worry about follow-up. The West created an entire generation of mutilated people, not because there was no alternative, but because it was the most convenient method. Number 4, poisoning by adulterated whiskey. The whiskey served in most Western saloons was not real whiskey. It was industrial alcohol mixed with caramel coloring, chewed tobacco for color, red pepper for burn, and sometimes strychnine for an extra kick. They called it coffin varnish, tanglefoot, or tarantula juice. It drank like whiskey, it killed like poison. Strychnine is an extremely potent rat poison. In tiny doses, it works as a stimulant. In larger doses, it kills by causing muscle spasms so violent they break the victim's own spine. It is one of the most painful deaths possible. And it was in the whiskey, served in hundreds of saloons. Men drank 3 shots, and half an hour later, convulsed in the street. Owners dragged bodies into alleys and reopened. No one was arrested. But it was not only strychnine. Some owners diluted alcohol and compensated by adding kerosene, gunpowder, or formaldehyde, the same liquid used to preserve corpses. Whiskey with methanol, wood alcohol, caused mass blindness. Dozens woke up permanently unable to see. Others died of kidney failure. No one regulated what was served. There were no inspections or standards. A saloon owner could serve anything labeled whiskey, if it killed customers. More arrived by train every week. Some cowboys, aware of the danger, preferred imported brandy when they could afford it. But brandy was expensive, so most drank the local poison and hoped not to be unlucky. Number 5. Deadly cold in the Rocky Mountains winter. Alfred Packer was a mountain guide when he agreed to lead 5 men across the San Juan Mountains of Colorado in January of 1874. Fatal mistake. The temperature dropped to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow reached 13 feet in depth. The group became trapped. 2 months later, Packer came out of the mountains alone, fat and healthy. The other 5? He had eaten them all. The jury took only 2 hours to convict him. But Packer was not alone in his survival strategy. Winters in the Rockies turned humans into animals. Entire mining camps vanished between November and April, and in spring they were found frozen in positions of people who tried to stay warm until the last second. In 1856, a group of Mormons called the Willie Handcart Company became trapped in Wyoming. Out of 404 people, 77 froze to death. Survivors reported seeing companions sit down in the snow to rest and simply never get up again. The body shuts down gradually. First you stop feeling your fingers, then you stop shivering, which is a bad sign because it means the body has given up trying to warm itself. Then comes a strange feeling of heat, and many hypothermia victims remove their clothes before dying, thinking they are hot. Naked bodies were found in the snow. The most disturbing part? Miners knew the risk and still climbed the mountains in the fall, betting they could come down before the blizzards. Most lost the bet and paid with their lives. Number 6. Lynchings and vigilante justice. Catherine Cattle Kate. Watson was 28 years old and owned a small ranch in Wyoming in 1889. Her crime? Competing with local cattle barons. On July 20th, 6 men invaded her property, accused her of cattle theft with no evidence, dragged her and her partner Jim Averill to a tree and hanged them. Kate was the first woman lynched in Wyoming. The killers were never tried. They were powerful men. Lynching in the West had nothing to do with justice. It was about power, control, and fear. The Montana Vigilance Committee hanged 22 men in 6 weeks in early 1864. They called it cleaning up the region. There was no trial. A secret nighttime meeting decided who deserved to die. In the morning, the condemned found a note nailed to the door. 3777, the dimensions of a grave. They had 24 hours to flee or be hanged. Most did not believe they would be executed without trial. A fatal mistake. Henry Plummer was sheriff of Bannock, Montana. The committee accused him of leading a gang of robbers. It may have been true. It may have been false. We will never know because they hanged him without investigation. In January of 1864, Plummer begged for a proper trial. He offered money. He promised to leave the territory. Nothing worked. He was dragged to the gallows he himself had built to execute criminals. The irony was not lost. The most disturbing lynching occurred in 1871 in Los Angeles. A mob invaded Chinatown and hanged 18 Chinese immigrants. The reason? A Chinese man had killed a white police officer. The 18 hanged had nothing to do with the crime. They were killed simply for being Chinese. None of the lynchers were convicted. Number 7. Diseases transmitted by contaminated water. Sacramento, California, summer of 1850. The river that cut through the city was both a source of life and death. People washed clothes on the bank, horses drank a few yards downstream, and soon after, someone filled buckets to take water home. The problem began when gold miners installed latrines upriver. In 3 weeks, the city lost 800 residents. Cholera arrived as silently as morning fog. The first symptom was watery diarrhea that seemed harmless. 6 hours later, the patient was too dehydrated to stand. In 12 hours, the heart stopped. Doctors called it blue death because the skin of the corpses took on a terrifying indigo tone. Dr. John Snow had already proven in London that cholera came from dirty water, but the information took years to cross the ocean. Meanwhile, city after city faced the same fate. Virginia City, Nevada, lost half its population in 1855. Deadwood, South Dakota, buried 200 people in 2 months. Typhoid fever worked more slowly, but was just as lethal. It began with headache and low fever that no one took seriously. In the second week, a pink rash appeared on the chest. In the third, the intestine perforated and the patient died of widespread infection. Imagine discovering that every gulp of clear water you drank was loaded with invisible human waste. That was the reality of the West. Thirst killed quickly, but dirty water killed everyone. Number 8. Syphilis and untreated venereal diseases. When gold was discovered, towns sprang up in weeks. And along with miners, always came brothels. Not hidden in alleys, but on the main street between the bank and the general store. In places like Deadwood and Tombstone, there were 50 men for every woman. One worker served 20 clients per night. No one checked health. In Deadwood in 1876, it is estimated that 40% of prostitutes carried syphilis. Each infected dozens of clients every week, who infected other women, who went home and infected wives, who passed it to babies in the womb. The disease was a master of disguise. It began with a sore that disappeared on its own. The victim thought it had healed. Months later, fevers and rashes appeared. Doctors diagnosed flu or rheumatism. Syphilis was a word no one spoke. Years later, the bacteria attacked brain and heart. People lost the ability to walk, see, think. Treatment until 1910 was liquid mercury. Doctors rubbed ointments or made patients inhale vapors. Mercury killed the bacteria but destroyed kidneys and liver. There was a medical saying, "One night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury." Children were born blind, deaf, deformed. No one spoke because it meant admitting infidelity and sin. Entire families were destroyed in silence. Syphilis killed more cowboys than all Dodge City gunfights combined. But while gunfights became legends told in saloons, syphilis was the silent killer no one admitted existed. Number 9. Hunger and scurvy on pioneer trails. Margaret Reed was 32 years old when she set out for California with the Donner Party in 1846. She carried practically a mansion on wheels, with fine furniture, mirrors, and even a cast iron stove. 5 months later, she was eating boiled leather belts and considered it a feast. Scurvy is not just a lack of vitamin C, it is the body literally falling apart. Gums rot and teeth fall out. Old wounds that had already healed reopen. Bones become so fragile that ribs break just from coughing. And the mind goes with it. Hallucinations, paranoia, depression. On the Oregon Trail, scurvy killed more people than all indigenous attacks combined. Families left in April with barrels of salted meat, flour, and dried beans. 0 fresh fruit because it did not last on the journey. In August, children began showing the first symptoms. In September, strong adults were bleeding from their eyes. There's a diary from a woman named Tamsin Donner that describes burying her own 7-year-old son, who died of scurvy. She writes that all his teeth had fallen out 3 days before death, and that he cried, asking for an apple she did not have to give. Native Americans tried to warn pioneers to eat pine nuts and roots of certain plants that prevented scurvy, but most white settlers ignored them, believing that Indian food was inferior, and they died from pure prejudice and ignorance. Number 10. Violent stagecoach robberies. The Wells Fargo stagecoach that left Deadwood on September 15, 1877 carried $27,000 in gold dust and 6 passengers. It never reached its destination. Sam Bass's gang intercepted it in a narrow canyon, blocked the road with fallen trees, and opened fire before the driver could pull the reins. The shotgun guard took 3 bullets to the chest before he could raise his weapon. The horses, frightened by gunfire, tried to run but tangled in harnesses and fell. The stagecoach overturned. One wheel crushed the leg of a passenger, a 34-year-old woman traveling to meet her husband in Cheyenne. She was trapped, screaming. The bandits ignored the screams. They executed the driver and the shotgun guard at close range. They stole the gold, then they killed all the passengers, including the woman trapped under the wheel. They left no witnesses. The stagecoach was found 2 days later by a group of hunters. Between 1870 and 1884, Wells Fargo recorded 313 stagecoach robberies. 63 resulted in deaths, but those are only the recorded ones. Smaller stage lines operated by local companies were attacked constantly, and many assaults never entered official statistics. The preferred method was ambush. Bandits chose a point where the road passed through a canyon or sharp turn, forcing the coach to slow. Then they opened fire from elevated positions. Passengers were trapped inside a wooden box that offered no protection. Bullets passed through walls like paper. Black Bart was the most famous stagecoach robber in California. Between 1875 and 1883, he robbed 28 stagecoaches. Always alone, always on foot, always wearing a flour sack as a mask. He never killed anyone. He was a gentleman, in a sense. But Black Bart was an exception. Most robbers had no scruples. Jesse James and his gang killed at least 17 people during robberies. Victims included drivers, shotgun guards, and passengers unlucky enough to witness the crime. The West had an unwritten rule: dead men do not testify. Number 11. Hangings due to judicial errors. Tom Horn was the last man hanged in Wyoming. November 20th, 1903. Accused of killing a 14-year-old boy named Willie Nickel. The problem? The evidence was circumstantial. The confession was obtained while Horn was drunk, and several witnesses said he was miles away when the crime happened. It did not matter. Horn had a reputation as a gunman, had killed before in the service of wealthy ranchers, and someone had to pay for the boy's murder, so Horn paid. It took 17 minutes for him to die at the end of the rope. It took so long because the executioner miscalculated the drop and Horn struggled. Years later, another man confessed to killing Willie Nickel. Too late. The West was full of Tom Horns. Men hanged for crimes they did not commit because the community needed a culprit and they were available. In Tombstone, Arizona, a Mexican miner named Jesus Martinez was accused of stealing a horse in 1881. 3 witnesses swore they had seen another man steal the horse. It did not matter. Martinez was hanged within 48 hours. The horse was found on the property of the real thief a week later. No one was punished for the mistake. The issue was that the Western justice system was more interested in speed than accuracy. Prosecutors wanted quick convictions. Traveling judges spent only a few days in each town and had to resolve all cases before leaving. Juries were formed from whoever was available, often uneducated men who decided based on racial prejudice or the defendant's appearance. And once the sentence was pronounced, execution happened in days, sometimes hours. There were no years of appeals, no review of evidence, rope, tree, crowd. Western justice. Number 12. Bubonic plague and rat-borne diseases. The same disease that killed 1/3 of Europe in the Middle Ages reached the Wild West. Bubonic plague arrived in California, ports hidden in the rats that infested ships. When authorities found the first bodies with black swellings the size of eggs in armpits and groins, they immediately recognized the horror beginning. The governor publicly denied there was plague. He said it was racist propaganda against immigrants. He forbade newspapers from mentioning the word plague under threat of fines. Meanwhile, people kept dying. The plague spread through rats that infested port cities. When a rat died, its fleas sought a new host and jumped onto humans. A flea the size of a sesame seed carried enough bacteria to kill an adult man. Symptoms began with fever and headache that felt like common flu. Then came the buboes, painful swellings that were lymph nodes filled with pus and bacteria. If untreated, the infection reached the lungs. At that stage, the patient coughed blood loaded with bacteria, and anyone breathing nearby became infected. Mortality rate, 90%. Between 1900 and 1904, San Francisco recorded 121 official cases and 113 deaths. But the real number was likely 3 times higher, hidden by the government to avoid scaring investors. The epidemic only ended when the city paid hunters to kill rats. More than 150,000 were killed. Even so, isolated cases continued until 1909. Mining towns with poor sanitation were paradises for rodents. Rats lived in grain warehouses and saloon basements under hotel floorboards. At night, they bit people while they slept, and each bite was Russian roulette. Number 13. Attacks by wild animals. Hunters went into the mountains in search of valuable pelts and simply vanished. Weeks turned into months, and when someone went looking, they always found the same scene. Torn clothes, a rusted rifle on the ground, and clean bones scattered around. No intact bodies, only remains. Grizzly bears were the true owners of the Rocky Mountains in the 1870s. Animals weighing about 880 pounds with no fear of humans, with claws the size of knives. Facing a grizzly with the weapons of that era was almost a guarantee of death. Rifles jammed, bullets ricocheted off the animal's thick skull, and you had 2 shots before needing to reload by hand. Meanwhile, the bear could cover 50 feet in 2 seconds. Montana, 1809. John Coulter was hunting beavers when he stepped away from his rifle. A mother bear with cubs attacked him. Deep wounds, broken bones, shredded flesh. Unarmed and defenseless, Coulter did the only thing possible. He played dead. The bear sniffed him, tested him with more bites, and finally walked away. Coulter waited and began to crawl. It was more than 186 miles to civilization. It took 11 days dragging his shattered body, drinking water from puddles. When he reached the fort, the guards hesitated to open the gate. He did not look human. Coulter survived. Most became skeletons. Wolf packs were a different terror. 20 coordinated predators hunting like an army. They followed travelers for days, waiting for the right moment. At night, they surrounded camps. Some howled to create distraction, while others attacked from behind. Settlers spent nights without sleep, feeding campfires, listening to the howls grow closer. Entire families disappeared, leaving only empty wagons. Number 14. Fatal accidents on the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail was the main route used by pioneers to cross the United States from east to west. It started in Missouri and ended in Oregon, cutting across about 1,988 miles of prairies, deserts, mountains, and rivers. Between 1840 and 1860, around 400,000 people made this journey in search of fertile land and a better life. 20,000 never arrived, 1 out of every 20. The journey took between 5 and 6 months, and each day brought new dangers. The trail forgave no mistakes, weakness, or bad luck. When someone died, you dug a shallow grave, pushed the body in, threw stones so wolves would not dig it up, and moved on. Stopping meant delay. Delay meant getting trapped in mountain snow, and that meant certain death. Rivers were the biggest killers. There were no bridges. Wide, with unpredictable currents, it was impossible to know where it was safe to cross. Families tied empty barrels to wagons for flotation. It worked half the time. The other half, the current flipped everything. The weight of belongings pulled it down, and people drowned trapped under their own goods. Children fell from moving wagons and were crushed by wheels. Parents watched helplessly. Ravines and canyons were deadly traps. Wagons overturned on steep descents, crushing those inside. Many bodies were left where they fell because there were no tools to dig into hard rock. Along the Oregon Trail, an estimated 20,000 graves exist. One grave every about 427 feet. But that number does not count bodies never buried, or whose graves were destroyed. The real number may be double. The Oregon Trail was not a path to a better life. It was a 1,988-mile slaughterhouse where you gambled everything on the hope of arriving alive. Number 15, fatal infections from lack of basic hygiene. Ranchers in the West did not bathe. This is not an exaggeration. Water was too precious to waste washing the body. A typical family bathed completely 2, maybe 3 times a year. In winter, basically never. The result? Constant infections. Barbers used the same razor on dozens of clients without washing it, spreading tuberculosis, syphilis, and skin infections. Hotels rented beds used by 20 different people without changing sheets. Lice, bedbugs, and fleas were so common people stopped complaining. Everyone had them. It was normal. But lice carried epidemic typhus. The bacteria lived in louse feces. When you scratched a bite, you spread feces on the skin. The bacteria entered the bloodstream. 2 weeks later, fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, delirium, rashes over the body. Mortality rate, 30%. In Deadwood in the winter of 1876, a typhus outbreak killed 89 people in a town of 800. More than 10% of the population died because no one washed clothes. Gangrene was another invisible killer. A farmer stepped on a rusty nail. It hurt for a few days, then stopped because nerves died. When he sought help, the foot was black, smelling of rotting flesh. Amputation was the only option, but often too late. The infection was already in the bloodstream. Septicemia killed within 3 days. Minor wounds became fatal infections in days. They called it blood poisoning. They believed it was literal poison and bled the patient to remove bad blood, making everything worse. The West did not kill only with bullets and bears. It killed with filth. Number 16. Fatal accidents in gold and silver mines. The promise was simple. Go down this hole, pull silver from the rock, and come out rich in months. Thousands believed it. They abandoned everything to chase this lie in the mountains of Colorado in the 1870s. The reality? 12 hours a day buried alive in dark tunnels, breathing dust that turned lungs into stone. Most died before seeing any fortune. Tunnels were dug by trial and error. No engineers, no studies, just pickaxes and dynamite. Thin wooden beams supported tons of rock. When they cracked, you had 1 second before the ceiling collapsed. Hundreds were buried alive each year. Many bodies stayed down there forever. It was not worth the effort to recover corpses. Fire was absolute terror. One candle tipping over, one electrical cable short-circuiting, and flames spread. The ventilation system fed the fire like a bellows. Toxic smoke descended faster than legs could climb. Miners trapped hundreds of feet below faced an impossible choice: climb toward the flames or go deeper, hoping the fire would not reach them. Smoke with carbon monoxide caused irresistible drowsiness. Men sat down to breathe and fell asleep forever. Rescue teams found groups dead, hugging each other. Messages scrawled in chalk. We could not get out. Tell our families we tried. Natural gas explosions tore dozens apart without warning. Elevator cables snapped, sending cages with 20 men into free fall. For owners, the math was clear. A dead miner cost nothing. Reinforcement timber cost money. Hiring a replacement took 1 day. Human life was worth less than ore. Number 17, death from dental infection. A toothache. It sounds ridiculous, does it not? Today you take an antibiotic and see a dentist. In the Wild West, an untreated cavity killed as surely as a bullet. And it killed slowly, with weeks of agony no remedy could relieve. Dentists barely existed in frontier towns. Teeth were pulled by the barber, the blacksmith, or anyone brave enough to hold rusty pliers. The procedure was simple and brutal. The patient was tied to a chair, filled with whiskey until barely able to speak, and the tooth was ripped out by brute force. No real anesthesia, no sterilization. Often the tooth broke, and they left the rotting root inside the gum. The problem began as discomfort, a twinge when chewing. Then it became constant, throbbing pain that prevented sleep. The cheek swelled, fever rose, but there was nothing to do but endure. When infection spread, it created an abscess full of pus that pressed on nerves and bones. Cowboys tried everything, rinsing with whiskey, clove oil, even gunpowder dissolved in water. Nothing worked. Bacteria kept multiplying, eating away the jawbone, opening a path to the bloodstream. When infection entered the blood, it was over. Septicemia had no cure. The person became feverish, delirious, and died in days as the body fought an invasion it could not defeat. Hospital records from the era showed dozens of deaths attributed to jaw fever or dental poisoning. Men who survived gunfights, bear attacks, and deadly crossings died because a tooth became infected. The cruel irony is that simply pulling the tooth early would have prevented all of this. But extracting a healthy tooth hurt so much that most waited until it was too late. Number 18. You could die for wanting better working conditions. Idaho, July of 1892. The silver mines of Coeur d'Alene produced fortunes for their owners, but the men who ripped silver from the earth lived in misery. They worked 12 hours a day in tunnels that could collapse at any moment, earning wages that barely paid for food and rent. When miners organized and demanded better conditions, mine owners had a simple response: fire everyone and hire strikebreakers for even lower wages. Miners formed unions, picketed, and blocked mine entrances. Owners responded by bringing in the Pinkerton Agency, private detectives who functioned as a private army. The Pinkertons arrived armed with Winchester rifles and machine guns. They were not police. They were mercenaries paid to break the strike by any means necessary. Violence exploded on July 11th. Armed miners surrounded the Frisco mill, where strikebreakers worked protected by Pinkerton guards. There was an exchange of gunfire for hours. Then miners brought dynamite and blew up the mill. The explosion was heard miles away. 6 men died, dozens were injured. The governor declared martial law and called in federal troops. More than 1,000 soldiers invaded Coeur d'Alene and arrested 600 miners without warrants. They were thrown into pens surrounded by barbed wire, sleeping on the ground, receiving rotten food once a day. Many died of dysentery and pneumonia in the pens. The mines reopened with strikebreakers protected by federal soldiers. Strike leaders received years in prison. Survivors returned to work defeated under the same brutal conditions. The message was clear: fighting for dignity cost your life.